How's it going, guys? I am Folkerman, your local brick built historian, with another episode of Brick Built History. Today, we're taking a look at Brickmania's M4A3 Sherman, the World War II U.S. Army medium tank. This is one of the tanks that, if you don't know what it is, you probably haven't paid attention to any history whatsoever. Well, any World War II history, that is. Because this is, without a doubt, the most recognizable, the most famous tank, probably only second to the Tiger. But without any further delay, because this is a tank that doesn't really need an introduction, let's go into the review and then into some of the history. So, the very first thing is, as always, I look at the box. So you have M4A3 Sherman, World War II U.S. Army medium tank, 581 Lego Brickmania brick arm elements, and a custom minifig. Original design by Cody Osell. You got the manufacturing plate here with basically the same information, except it adds BKM 2306, skill level 3 out of 5. 2306. I have kit number 55 and I think 54 because I got two of them right after the other. And then you have a monochromatic image with a side view of the left side, to be specific. But let's take a look at the two Shermans I have, because there's no such thing as too many Shermans. So put them front and center, and you can see that it is very Sherman-like. You have the 45-degree slope here, and then it goes down this gradient slope off to the side. You have a 360-degree turret with the 75mm gun that elevates and depresses. The 30mm ball turret up here. You have the transmission case here with a very unique design to it, although it does like to come down like that. So you just got to be careful. Also, the grills on the bogies like to move if you're not careful with it. It rolls pretty okay for being on a flat surface. You have the sticker stars on the transmission plate, on the side here, on the turret, and then you have the sprocket sticker back there. You got the engine deck and the exhaust, I believe that is, on the back. And this engine deck has a nice slope to it, as you would expect. A hatch for the driver, hatch for the hull gunner. You have that hatch for the tank commander, and basically a pseudo hatch for the gunner. But side by side, I love these tanks. Every history buff needs at least one Sherman. I have, see here, 1, 2. I have a Easy 8. Then I have a Firefly. I think I have one more somewhere. I thought. Well, I see I have 4 Shermans, which I think is pretty good. But anyway, I love these Cody Shermans here. I don't have any Dan Shermans, I don't think. Maybe that Sherman Firefly is based off of Dan. Oh, the Easy 8. I forgot about that. But yeah, so I really like the look of it. This one does have a issue with the turret getting caught sometimes, but I think that's just my building, because this one is perfectly fine basically. Oh, but I'd say overall, good job. And there's a really good attention to detail with this part over here, which I'll get into with the history. So, the history of the Sherman. Since this is a variant of the Sherman, I have other variants of the Sherman. I'm just going to go into the details of the M4A3 with a brief history of the Sherman overall. So it was designed by the U.S. Department of Ordnance. It's basically a conglomerate that was like, hey, we need a tank. And it was introduced in 1940. So this tank was before America even entered the war, but it was given out to Lend-Lease. And it was about $44,000 to $64,000 per tank, and that's in 1945 money, which is pretty expensive. Well, actually not more expensive than, say, a Tiger, but, you know, in 1944 days, that's an expensive piece of equipment. And it would be produced from 1940 all the way to 1945, with 49,234 different Shermans being built, which is absolutely crazy. And it would be retired in U.S. service in 1957, which means this saw service in Vietnam. So the M4A3 Sherman is distinguishable by the flat engine deck with the grills, because the M4A3 uses a 4GAA V8 gas engine with a 450 that produced 450 horsepower. The M4 and M4A1 used a Continental radial engine, which was an aircraft engine, and it didn't have these grills on the engine deck. And then the M4A2, I want to say, is the Marine version that had dual diesel engines. I believe it was dual Cadillac V8 diesels or something like that, which the Marines used and was exported to England as well, I want to say. And then the M4A4 was the 30 bank, huge, like 6 inline cylinder engines combined, and that one you can tell the difference because the bogies are separated a little bit farther. But anyway, the Sherman is a very interesting tank design, mostly due to its relatively high silhouette. A lot of other tanks, like say this German Panzer III, is a little bit shorter, especially in the hull region. The turret is about the same, but because the hull is shorter, it's a lot smaller. Even though these are both medium tanks, the Sherman is pretty tall compared to it. Put it side by side here. You can see the Sherman goes a little bit taller than the Panzer III. Now, this does provide a weird thing where you really can't hide this thing. You can't hide it in a bush. You can probably hide it behind a house, kind of like Kelly's Hero style, but this thing is really high up there, so it's kind of hard to hide. The other thing is it uses vertical volley spring suspension. Basically, you have these bogies here, and the bogies move on their own. The Sherman is really one of those main tanks that used this system, and the reason is that you can replace a bogie. Like if one bogie gets damaged, you can replace that bogie with another bogie, and boom, there you go. While other, like suspension or torsion bar, you have to replace the torsion bar and all that, which if it's a Tiger tank with torsion bar suspension, you have to take off this wheel and these wheels and this wheel to get to the torsion bar. Sherman makes it easy. One of the other things is it's a Ford sprocket driven tank, meaning that the sprocket here is in the front, and then it's got the idler in the back, and the idler is the adjustable wheel that changes the tension of the track. The Germans also used Ford sprockets in most of their tanks, but like the British and the Russians and the British and the Russians mostly used rear-driven sprockets. And the front-driven sprocket does give some advantages, like you have the transmission right up here, and It's a lot easier for the driver to shift, because these are manually operated. So you have a shifter. So it's a lot easier to shift. But you have the drive shafts going from the engine all the way up here to the transmission, which you have to build over the drive shaft, which is why this is so tall. Even though the Panzer III also uses a forward sprocket, but it's, I don't know. Americans do things different. We always do things different. One of the things that really is great about the Sherman is the fact that it's so maintainer friendly. As I mentioned with the bogies before, these sprockets are interchangeable. You don't have a certain set of sprockets for a certain set of tanks. It's, say this tank is down because its engine is having troubles, but this tank needs a new sprocket. You just pull the sprocket from here, slap it in there, boom, good to go. To change the transmission, you have 3 plates up here. You just take off, go in there, maybe an hour or two, boom. A Panther, that transmission breaks, and then suddenly you have like a 20-hour job to just go and get the thing out of there. While the Sherman, easy to fix, easy to go. This ridge right here on the front of the transmission case is because of the bolts. There's these big bolts, about yay big, that go along here. And earlier, like the M4 and M4A1, they were just flat on there, but then they would get shot and you couldn't get to the transmission case anymore because the bolt was shot off. And it was like, you know, sheared so that the bolt would like be flat on there, but you can't get it out, which is annoying. So they kind of like drilled a hole into the transmission case to put the bolts, so that the bolts are more protected. Some of the very early Shermans had dual machine guns for the driver, which they immediately took off because they realized it was really stupid. But as Americans do, we decided to put as many machine guns in there as possible. So you have a machine gun in the hull, you have a coax machine gun alongside the 75mm, and you have a 50 caliber machine gun on the top for anti-aircraft use. Most of the time it's used for anti-personnel, but you know, you gotta do what you do. The 75mm M3 gun has been a topic of controversy between some historians on whether or not it was actually effective. Well, judging from the fact that it could take out a Panzer III or a Panzer IV at 1,000, like their front armor at 1,000 yards, I'd say that's pretty darn good, especially since Shermans were most likely going to fight Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs. They didn't usually run into a Tiger that often, unless they were in the Africa campaign, but most Tigers were sent to the Eastern Front. So, you know, there's the small chance that you'd have a Sherman go against a Tiger, but usually you'd have like 15 Shermans against like 2 Tigers. So they may shoot out 14 of those Shermans, but it's that last Sherman that's going to kill them. It has a max speed of 22 to 30 miles per hour with a range of 100 to 150 miles, depending on the model. The research is mostly done with the Sherman itself, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly which what in this range the M4A3 falls into, but I believe the M4A3 is more on the 30 mile per hour category, since it's probably a little bit faster with that gas engine in the back, the good old diesel or Detroit engineering. But either way, the M4A3 is the American model. This is the model that you see on every American front line, driven by every American, in the Army at least. These are the ones that Oddball would have in Kelly's Heroes. These are the ones that the Americans would use in Patton. Patton really did enjoy the Sherman quite a bit for his old ways, even though he says the M1 Garand is the best battle device, the best battle device ever. I know he loves the Sherman, and he loved riding the Sherman. But beyond that, there's not really too much I can say about the Sherman that people don't already know, other than how to spot the different variants. And if you want to learn how to spot the different variants, go ahead and watch the Tank Museum, because David Fletcher does a way better job, while also being way funnier, to help identify different Shermans and all that. But, you know, these Shermans brought to you by Cody, I really enjoy. I love having them in a convoy. Say you have an M24 Chaffee alongside. Maybe take a Wildcat or a Hellcat, you know, for anti-tank purposes. I mean, it's good. Might as well take the little Sherman, the Stuart, and apply it in there. There's just so much fun I can have with this. Like, I can just have a whole convoy of American armor, and it just looks so good, especially having these white stars on there, and they're all just together. But I think I've rambled on enough, and you know, you guys basically know everything about the Sherman already, and not really too much I can add to that. So, with that said, drop a like if you liked it. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, subscribing would be a really good idea, because as you can see, I still have to do that, I still have to do that, and I still have to do that. So these three will come in sometime later, whenever I get to it. But there's just so much I have. I have World War I stuff I still need to get into, a whole metric load of World War II stuff, and some modern stuff. I mean, I still have the F-22, the F-35, the Alligator, SH-60, the Black Hawk. So, yeah, there's a lot I need to do. So, comment what you want me to do, though, because I need ideas of what you guys want to see. And, you know, tell a friend who would be interested in this stuff, because there's so much to learn about and all that. But enough rambling. I have been Folkerman, and let's continue to build history.